Most of us live with the quiet assumption that we know who we are. We speak of being ourselves as if the self were a stable object we could simply point to and recognize. Yet when we observe our daily lives more carefully, a subtle fracture appears. There is the self we present to the world, the self that speaks in meetings, smiles at strangers, posts online, and fulfills expectations. And then there is the self that exists beneath performance, the self that feels, doubts, hesitates, desires, and sometimes contradicts everything it outwardly displays. These two selves coexist, but they are not always aligned. The tension between them shapes not only our relationships with others, but our relationship with ourselves. The performed self is social by nature. It is shaped in response to audiences, whether real or imagined. Long before social media made self-presentation explicit, thinkers like Irving Goffman observed that everyday life resembles a stage. We adjust our language, posture, tone, and even emotional expressions depending on the role we are playing. At work, we perform competence and confidence. With friends, we perform ease and humor. In moments of conflict, we may perform calm even when we feel overwhelmed inside. None of this is inherently false. Performance is not the same as deception. It is a form of social navigation, a way of making ourselves legible and acceptable to others. Yet the experienced self operates according to a different logic. It is not concerned with coherence or impression. It is fragmented, often contradictory, and deeply private. The experienced self contains thoughts we would never voice aloud, emotions we do not fully understand, and impulses that clash with our values. It is shaped less by social expectation and more by memory, sensation, and internal narrative. While the performed self asks, "How am I being seen?" the experienced self asks, often wordlessly, "How does this feel?" Problems arise when the distance between these two selves grows too wide. When performance becomes habitual and experience is consistently suppressed, a sense of alienation can emerge. People may describe feeling as though they are watching themselves live their life, or as though their actions belong to someone else. This is not always dramatic or pathological. Often it is subtle. A successful professional may feel strangely empty after achieving everything they once wanted. A person praised for their emotional strength may feel increasingly disconnected from their own vulnerability. Over time, the performed self can harden into a mask that is difficult to remove, even in private. Modern culture intensifies this divide. In a world that rewards visibility, clarity, and consistency, the performed self is constantly reinforced. Social platforms encourage us to curate identities that are recognizable and repeatable. We are nudged to build a personal brand, to present a coherent narrative of who we are and what we stand for. Ambiguity, contradiction, and uncertainty, natural features of the experienced self, are difficult to display in such environments. As a result, many people learn to edit not only what they show others, but what they allow themselves to feel. However, the experienced self does not disappear simply because it is ignored. It resurfaces in indirect ways, through anxiety that seems to have no clear source, through exhaustion that rest does not fix, through a persistent sense that one's life is slightly misaligned. The body often registers what the performed self tries to override. A forced smile can coexist with a tight chest. A confident speech can be followed by hours of self-doubt. These signals are not signs of weakness. They are evidence that experience resists complete control. It is tempting to romanticize the experienced self as more authentic than the performed one, but this distinction can be misleading. The experienced self is not inherently wiser or morally superior. It includes resentment, fear, and self-sabotage just as much as intuition and depth. Likewise, the performed self is not merely a lie we tell the world. It can be aspirational. Sometimes we perform qualities, patience, confidence, kindness, before we fully feel them, and in doing so, we grow into them. Performance can shape experience, just as experience shapes performance. The real issue, then, is not the existence of two selves, but the rigidity of the boundary between them. Psychological health may depend less on choosing oneself over the other, and more on allowing communication between them. When performance becomes completely detached from experience, life feels hollow. When experience is allowed to inform performance, our actions gain depth and credibility. This does not mean expressing everything we feel at all times. Rather, it means recognizing our inner states without immediately censoring or reshaping them to fit a role. Moments of solitude play a crucial role in this process. When no audience is present, the performed self has less incentive to dominate. Silence, boredom, and unstructured time can allow the experienced self to surface more clearly. This is often uncomfortable. Without roles to play, we may feel unsure of who we are or what we want. Yet this discomfort is not a failure. It is a form of recalibration. It reminds us that identity is not a fixed performance, but an ongoing negotiation between inner experience and outer expression. Language itself reveals the tension between these selves. We often speak about our emotions in ways that distance us from them. I should feel grateful. I know I'm lucky. It doesn't make sense that I feel this way. Such phrases signal an internal split where the performed self evaluates the experienced self instead of listening to it. Over time, this habit can erode trust in one's own perceptions. If we consistently override what we feel in favor of what we believe we should feel, the experienced self becomes increasingly muted. Reconnecting these selves requires a different orientation toward inner life, one that values curiosity over control. Instead of asking whether a feeling is justified, we might ask what it is trying to communicate. Instead of forcing ourselves to align with a role, we might examine whether the role still serves us. This process does not lead to a final, unified self. Human identity is too complex for that. What it offers instead is flexibility, the ability to move between performance and experience without losing contact with either. In the end, the self you perform and the self you experience are not enemies. They are partners in a delicate, ongoing dialogue. One helps you function in the world, the other helps you understand your place within it. When they are allowed to inform and correct each other, life feels less like a series of acts and more like a coherent, if imperfect, story. And perhaps that is the closest we come to being ourselves. Not in eliminating performance, but in ensuring that what we perform remains anchored to what we truly experience.